Good afternoon, Sri Ashok Rao. Good afternoon, Sri Ashok Rao.
Sir, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How the video correct is? Are you able to see and listen to me, Ashok Rao?
Yes, sir, you are audible. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
able to see you as well.
Yeah. So as I have already informed you, this is a training program in public finance for officers of Karnataka State Audit and Accounts Department, and it is a very focused training program on public finance. It's a very specialized training program, and the duration of this training session is about 1 hour and 30 minutes. I request you to make your presentation up to 1:15 or between 1 to 1:15, up to 1 hour and more, up to 1:15, and afterwards there will be a short discussion of question and answer. Is it okay?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So if you are ready with your presentation, then we will begin the session now.
Yes.
Yeah. Welcome back to all the participants for the second session of today's training. And this training session has a very special topic to be focused. That is the emerging trends in public finance, climate and sustainable development goals financing. Very special. Because up to now we know how government has been accommodating the expenditure programs within the budget. And we also know how many programs are also undertaken by the government outside the budget. But climate financing and sustainable development goals financing are the emerging areas of public finance at the global level, at the national level, and even at the subnational level, including Karnataka state. We are fortunate to have today a very distinguished chartered accountant, Sri Ashok Rao, to speak to us on this very important topic of the training in public finance. Currently, Sri Ashok Rao is the Executive Director and Senior Consultant in the management MGC. He is actually a finance professional with wide experience in consulting to the governments, corporates, educational institutions, and not-for-profit institutions. Please note very carefully, he has the experience of advising all the stakeholders in the society, comprising the governments, corporates, educational institutions, and institutions not meant for profit. In the government sector, he has worked with various levels of the government and government institutions both in India and abroad. His engagements outside India, including countries Africa, Bhutan, and Middle East. He has published many articles on government accounting in national journals, including a brilliant article on medium-term fiscal policy formulation for a municipal city corporation, that is Shivamogga City. And that brilliant article was published by the Journal of Arthika Charche, the FPI Journal of Governance and Economics here. Broadly, Sri Ashok Rao has different areas of expertise, including policy advisory, public financial management and accountability, process engineering, organizational restructuring, information technology and training. he has been a big support to the FPI in participating as resource person in training programs on financial management and also public finance for officers of the Karnataka State Audit and Accounts Department. And he has been very kind to accept our invitation this time and to speak on a very important and an emerging topic in public finance at all levels, global, national, and the state level. On behalf of the Fiscal Policy Institute and on behalf of every participant, I have great pleasure in welcoming Sri Ashok Rao to our institute, to this training program, and request him to conduct this training session on this important topic. Over to you, Sri Ashok Rao.
Thank you, sir, for the introduction and welcome. It is always a pleasure to be here. And ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ participants. So fortunately or unfortunately, this is probably your last lecture of 2020, probably. So there are a lot of things to forget 2020 for. I hope this session should not be one of them. So let us hope that it doesn't become one of them. Because the reason I'm saying this is, and full compliments to Fiscal Policy Institute for choosing such a topic, first of all, which is not a very, what do we say, it is not an in vogue topic. We are all not working on it right away. The climate and sustainable development goals. And more importantly, for choosing a faculty like me, knowing fully well that there is no expert in this sector, at least for now. We are all kind of half-baked knowledge that is there. But compliments to FPA and Professor Narayana. He said, let us do it. I mean, it will definitely be a sensitization. And definitely it helped me a lot while preparing for this session to understand a lot of these concepts. So some of this, talking of climate and SDG budgeting or financing, you may not be applying it straight away in the present day context. But as we go through the presentation, you will realize that this is not very far off. It is not something many years away. It is already happening worldwide. It is happening in India also, and Karnataka also has started making strides in this direction. And before the end of your career, definitely you will be coming across a lot of these concepts, and hopefully you will be implementing these as well, particularly as accounts officers, chief accounts officers, or CFOs of organizations. Governmentally, these concepts will definitely be required. So what I'll do is I have a presentation, so I'll share my screen, and then we can get started. So I suppose my screen is visible. Can you just confirm that the screen is visible and voice is audible clearly?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we are talking of climate, and SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, these are both very vast topics, but our focus today is to see what is the interface or interlinking between public finance and climate and sustainable development goals, because that is where we have a role to play. That is what affects us as Karnataka State Audit and Accounts Department personnel. This is what affects us maximum. So of course, since the topic is about recent developments in public finance, we will just touch upon them and go to the specific topic. So first, to begin with, of course, Professor Narayana has already given an introduction, but I am from a company called Management and Governance Consulting. In short, we call ourselves MAGC. So we are in our 21st year, and incidentally, it started with, though a Chennai-based company with a branch in Bangalore, our company started with a project in Karnataka itself, where we were trying to reform the finances of Bangalore City Corporation. And then subsequently, public finance has become a major area of consulting for us. We have people who are qualified in public finance qualification from the IMF as well as the CA Institute. And we've done work with many state governments as well as assignments with the central government and also the third tier local bodies as well. on various finance aspects. So with this brief introduction, let us get into the topic. So first topic is of course recent trends in public finance, and I need not even say this. One of the biggest trends that we see, at least in 2020, is the only direction public finance is down. It is severely stretched worldwide thanks to the COVID-19 situation. It is what they call as the scissor effect. Literally, that is what has happened to public finances worldwide, where revenues have declined due to slow economic growth. India was already experiencing tough economic growth, so COVID-19 has added to that. Many countries are far worse off. On one side, revenue is declining, and on the other side, public expenditure is mounting. Expenditure both to fight the pandemic and also to kickstart the economy, so that the economy comes back to the normal levels. So government has to spend to kickstart the economy. So on both counts, expenditure is rising, revenue is falling. That is why it is called the scissor effect. And of course, the gap has to be met out of borrowing or debt, which is increasing to unsustainable levels. It is going up to those levels. So it's a very not a very pleasant scenario, at least for the next year or so. And of course, financing this pandemic recovery is a major challenge, because you cannot keep borrowing. You will have to find new ways of funding it. And of course, as auditors, particularly for today's group, one big challenge is the propriety aspects of the emergency spending that is happening. We are supposed to audit these expenditures. We know time was short, procedures had to be really fast, cut down to meet some of these emergency expenditures. So whether every rupee of public money was spent following due canons of propriety is one of the things which will continue to give us headaches as you are auditing 1920 or more 2021, 21, 22 expenditure. So this will be a big thing which will bear on your mind. The audit risk has gone up significantly, and your procedures also will have to take care of this additional risk. So these are some of the things that are happening thanks to the pandemic in short term. But there are certain long-term trends that we are witnessing in public finance, which we need to be aware of. One is the migration to accrual accounting and global standards. So accrual accounting, we must all be aware that the local bodies, it has been happening for quite some time. In Karnataka, whether it is Gram Panchayats, they are already on accrual accounting. Urban local bodies, all the three levels of urban local bodies, they are on accrual accounting. But slowly the trend is moving to accrual accounting at the state government and the central government level. The discussions have started. In the international public sector accounting standards and that how to implement on the discussion is happening. And a study by ACCA indicates that 65% of governments worldwide will be transitioning to accrual accounting by 2023. So that trend is already there, and India cannot remain very far behind. Medium-term budgeting, more and more this is being given a push both by funding institutions as well as public finance institutions, that budgeting must have a medium-term outlook. Outcome budgeting concept is not new. Outcome budgeting, a lot of things have happened in India already. But outcome budgeting in the true sense has to happen rather than preparing a performance budget which goes as an annex to the main budget. The entire budgeting exercise should be driven by outcomes, so which is a journey. It cannot happen in 1 year. So that is a trend which is coming. Another important trend is consolidated financial reporting. So when you say government is a huge entity, and as of now we are preparing accounts only for a kind of, I would even say, not a sub-entity, but if you say a corporation, we prepare accounts only for the corporation. There might be entities promoted by the corporation. Similarly, at state and central government level, there are public sector units. There are autonomous bodies which are carrying huge liability, which ultimately has to be borne by the government if these institutions fail. Corporation of India, Shipping Corporation of India, things like that. which are a strain on public finances. So financial reporting or balance sheet, income expenditure, receipts payment, budget variance statement, which can cover all the government entities, has to be prepared. It is a very big challenge to prepare that. ಅದು ಹೇಗೆ ಮಾಡೋದು ಅನ್ನೋದು, that is also one of the trends that is happening. Next is public investment management. So I am covering a lot of topics, but the idea is to, about each of this, just to sensitize you, not to get into each of this. Public investment management is for every rupee spent on creating new infrastructure or development, how can it be managed better? Right from planning stage, the investment stage, the execution stage, and more, very, very importantly, the what we call as the O&M or the operation and maintenance phase. How more money, more benefit can be derived from every rupee spent another. It is the whole concept of public investment management. Recently, ನೀವೆಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಈ national infrastructure pipeline, lot of things is being heard about that. There is a pipeline of projects. So creating a pipeline of projects is one of the core tenets of public investment management. So it shows that our government is also thinking on those lines. They are trying to improve public investment management. They are creating a pipeline of projects where people can come and invest in them. So that is one of the things. Then the other one is diagnostic studies and ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. So just like a doctor diagnoses what is the problem with us, there are studies which can diagnose the public finance system of a government and give recommendations on the areas of improvement. ಯಾಕೆ ಇವಾಗ why is it a recent trend ಅಂದ್ರೆ, more and more that public finance is getting stretched. Governments are looking at how more efficiently we can spend the money, how more efficiently we can generate the money with the same set of tax base and or spending resources on that. So that is where such tools are being useful. PEFA andre public expenditure and financial accountability, that is one tool. PERT andre public expenditure review technique, to review the money spent on a particular sector. PIMA public investment management, which we just discussed. DEMP andre debt management performance assessment, how well the government is managing its borrowings another. MAPS andre assessment of procurement systems. So ನಿಮ್ಮ procurement systems, how good are they? TADAT is an assessment of tax systems. So each area of sub area of public finance also there are assessment tools, and more governments are trying to use these tools to further improve their financial systems. So these were some of the broad trends that are going on in the public finance area. That was more for information. But there are clearly 2 or 3 important trends which are happening, which across the board you can see. In newspaper, it will already be there. One is, of course, on thematic budgeting. So gender budget, child budget. For example, Karnataka presented its what do they call as a child budget last year. Though this was the first time that they presented. Fiscal Policy Institute was actively involved in that exercise. Thematic budget alli, if you take one of the themes which is climate, so climate budgeting or climate finance is another key area. Similarly, sustainable development goals, there are 17 sustainable development goals. Adikke hege budgeting madodu. So that is also emerging as a very, very important area. And amongst all the trends, these are some of the 3 important trends that are happening of late. So why are these becoming important? Why are these 3 trends? Obviously, as we know, the challenges we are facing today as a world, we can broadly bucket them into social challenges, how to ensure that all sections of the society benefit from the development. Economic challenges, how to ensure that whatever development we are talking of, as of now it may be benefiting only you and me, but how is the poor man on the street, how is it benefiting him? Like the inclusive development anta heltivi, economic development, that is very, very important. And most important is to ensure that in this race for development, we take care of the environment. Unfortunately, we are doing a very bad job of it. As mankind, we are doing a very bad job of taking care of the environment. which is why it is becoming more and more of a bigger challenge. So as I told you, meeting these challenges requires new systems or new methods of raising revenue, raising resources, allocating those resources amongst. These are all, each one of them is a big challenge, and money is always short. So there has to be allocation based on priorities. A priority decide madlike you need a system. So, and finally, when you spend those resources, you need systems to ensure that they are properly spent. So traditional budgeting and financing systems or accounting systems cannot ensure this, because these are oversimplified, either functional classification or economic type classification of budget and accounts, which may not suffice, and that is why a fresh look is being thought of, and which is why we are discussing this session today about what this climate and SDG budgeting is all about. So in case if somebody wants to comment in between or share something, please feel free, because this whole this whole presentation is more like a knowledge sharing rather than getting into one concept in depth. And if any of you have experience in these areas, we would love to hear that. Or else, as Professor suggested, in the end also we can take up questions. So outcome budgeting. So outcome budgeting is not a new concept for people in government, in India particularly. ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಇದು ಬಂದಿದೆ. But before we get into climate and SDG budgeting, we should have a fair idea of what outcome budgeting really is, the concept, not how it is prepared, because many of you are already preparing. So traditional budgeting is input focused. Input andre, what are the inputs we are putting into the system? System andre, you may call it the society or our country or whatever. We are spending money on so many things. It is generating some things. That is our, as government, that is our input into the system, hoping that the system will use those inputs and economic and social growth happens. Whereas outcome budgeting is focused on the outcomes generated. What do we mean? Traditional budgeting will answer the question, what is the budget for the year? What is the outlay on hospitals, example? What is the outlay on maternal care centers? What is the budget of the education department, engineering department? Suppose you take a municipality or something. So these are the questions which traditional budgeting will very, very clearly answer. In fact, you don't need anybody to answer. Minimal budget either, you can always see and quickly tell what is the allocation. Whereas the outcome budgeting has to answer questions like, we need to increase the hospital beds per 1,000 people from X value which is there to today to Y value. So what all needs to be done for that, and for that what is the money set aside? How, and this money might be set aside in multiple departments or through multiple agencies or through multiple budget line items, but it should answer this kind of a question. Similarly, second question, how to improve the maternal mortality rate from A which is there today to B where we want to go? What all needs to be done, how many years it is going to take, and who all needs to spend money on that. And the budgeting has to be driven by outcomes. Taking this example a little further, so where we will talk of let us understand the difference between outcome, output and outlay. Just to take a few examples, the outcome is to reduce travel time from one junction, Lal Junction to Veerasandra. Presently, the transit time is 12 minutes. We want to reduce it to 5 minutes. For which we will discuss, and it will come up with an output which says we have to construct a flyover at Maruti Circle. Then it translates into an outlay. It can't be done in 1 year. Suppose it is a 3-year project. You will allocate money in each year. First year for all the design and DPR and studies, 5 crores. Then the actual investment 150 crores, and completing the project another 50 crores. So each of these targets, I will not go into each, it is there on the screen. What is the outcome? What is the outlay for that? What is the output which will address that? And what is the outlay? And who will spend this outlay? Is the entire concept of outcome budgeting. So our present budget, the annual budget is very strong in these areas. What is the output? What is the outlay is very clear. The outcome aspects, either it is an annex to the main budget, we say performance budget and discuss about the outcomes, or it is totally left out and it is there in respective scheme documents as to what is the scheme or program documents as to what is the outcome required. And outlay for 1 year is definitely there in the annual budget, but subsequent years comes as part of the multi-year budget. So it is in multiple pieces. It is all there in multiple pieces. Outcome budgeting will bring all of these together, link them up together, so that year on year you can see what is the progress against outcomes. So this is the broad concept of outcome budgeting. So this discussion was required just for you to get a brief as to when we get into the subsequent discussion on climate budgeting, this outcome budgeting thinking will be very useful. So here let us take a step back and see why are we talking of climate budgeting in particular. How big is this problem? Most of you would be reading about it in newspapers, news channels, everywhere it is coming. But I thought we'll bring the numbers together. So it is said that 4.5% of India's GDP is at risk due to climate change. The amount required is 162.5 lakh crores between 2015 and 2030. This was a study done in 2015 in India to challenge or to address climate change. Already Government of India is spending close to 2.6% of GDP on adaptation. In adaptation, we are not preventing climate change, but when climate events happen, we are trying to adapt to that, adjust to that, floods, droughts, kind of flooding, or some diseases, waterborne diseases. All these are a result of climate change, and adapting to that itself, we are spending so much money. And there's a funding gap of almost $36 billion to address this. So this might have give you an idea. No single player or no single sector, forget player, sector, private sector in itself, or the non-profit sector, or the government can address this problem by itself. It has to work together. So then naturally our systems should be able to answer questions like, that given that this is such a big problem, what is the resource allocation for climate change, for fighting climate change? What is it that we are allocating within the government? And if you see today's picture, if you look at the kind of documentation, public finance systems we have, it is all in bits and pieces. So we might get something here, how much on wind energy, somewhere we get on how much on effluent control, but we don't have, when we say we don't have, our systems are not giving the full picture of what is the resources that are going for fighting climate change. Why? Because mostly our budgets are functional budgets. They are driven by the functions of the government. And below functions, you have this economic type objected and encouraged. That is by the nature of expense. So function gets translated into program becomes scheme, and then below that you have the objectives. So which is why we are not getting a complete picture of how much is going towards a particular theme. So what is the answer? Climate budgeting. So climate budgeting is the answer. So it is not that my job is over by saying this. Our target today is to understand what is this climate budgeting. Climate budgeting is a practice that accounts for budgetary measures that support climate change related actions across the country, state or city, whichever government you are talking of, central government, state government or local government. So climate change related actions andre enu, as I was just mentioning, ಎರಡು ತರ action ಬರುತ್ತೆ climate change related. One is called mitigation. Mitigation ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆ climate change event ಆಗದೇ ಇರೋ ತರ prevent ಮಾಡೋದು, preventing the climate change action. Other one is called adaptation action. Andre it has already happened, soil erosion has already happened, floods are happening because of that. How do we, when the flood happens, how do we ensure that it causes minimum loss to life and property and economic activity? So some money is required for that. So ಎರಡು words ನೀವು ನೆನಪಿಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ, mitigation, adaptation. So either you put money to prevent something from happening, or you put money to to bear the effects of, to address the effects of what has already happened. So helps in climate tagging specific expenditure items. So for each of the expenditure items that we are budgeting, adukku climate tag attach agutte in climate budgeting. Yen climate tag, we'll see that. The climate budget shows, in addition to the financial outlay, definitely it will show how much money is being spent, but in addition to that, the baseline, where we stand today on climate change, what are our key indicators? Against the key indicators, where is our country now? And what are the targets to be achieved by spending this money? What adaptation mitigation measures are proposed? Exactly, these two words are coming here. And then who is responsible for completing them? If you take one adaptation measure, like flood control, the local government has to spend some money, they have to take certain actions. The disaster recovery force has to take some actions, they need money for that. And then the local NGOs have to take some actions, they need government support for that. So who has to take actions, how much money is required for that, it will address. Otherwise, what is going to happen when there are floods in, say, let us take some city in Karnataka, North Karnataka. A flood adag enagutte, the disaster recovery force, SDRF, will have its own budget for addressing floods. The municipality will have its own budget for addressing floods. But these are all not related to the same outcome. Climate budgeting, by tagging that item, it helps ensure that these are all tagged to a single item. Tagging ಅಂದ್ರೆ just like ನಾವು ಬ್ಯಾಗಿಗೆ ಸೂಟ್ಕೇಸಿಗೆ ಟ್ಯಾಗ್ ಹಾಕ್ತೀವಲ್ಲ, saying this is my name ಅಂತ in the airport. ಅದೇ ತರ each budget line item a tag is added, one or more tags are added to address the climate change. What are the advantages of doing this? Informed choices on how and where to channel scarce resources. When you start doing tagging, that is when you know that are we putting the money in the right place, or should it be put in some other place, or for a particular climate item we are underfinancing it, adukku ಬೇಕಾಗೋದು 100 ಕೋಟಿ, but all the budgets together we are getting only 80 crores, so there is a shortage of 20 crores for addressing this climate problem anta. These kind of information starts coming out from the system to take decisions. So it is not going to get the 20 crores, but you have the information to take the decision on how to fulfill the 20 crores gap. Second point, by building more climate resilient infrastructure today, governments can save money in the long run. This I need not even say. If you have a good tree cover, if you invest on tree cover today, you know flooding will not happen tomorrow, and you will save money on adapting to flooding situations or flood events tomorrow. So definitely climate budgeting will help. ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಇದೆ where groundwater recharge has been done, and then they are seeing the benefits of it. Next year there is no flooding, as well as in the dry months water is available. So allella nimge there is a saving in future. Next, it will allow state governments to assess the climate relevant impact of money spent on development projects. So you are constructing suppose a mining project or a huge port project. Every project has a climate impact. So that doesn't mean because it is a climate negative impact we have to abandon it, because economic development has to happen. So, but this will help us to see which project has how much impact on climate, negative impact, negative, or some of the projects or many projects might also have a positive impact as well. Then clearly defined climate goals with budgetary intention helps raise money for climate projects. Very, very important. Most of the funding institutions, international development agencies or the not-profit institutions, more and more their funding they are linking to climate. So the moment they link to climate, the next question they are asking is, okay, we will give money, but do you have a system of budgeting and accounting for climate action? That is why governments are moving to that, to give the confidence to the funder that if you give money for a climate action, we will have an exact way of tracking that money. So that is where it is going to be a big advantage. So state A will be in a better position compared to state B if it has a climate budgeting system. In fact, we will see in the next slide, Gujarat has already gone ahead with such systems. ಸೊ ಇನ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟಿಸ್ ನಾನು ಇಷ್ಟೊತ್ತು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ದು ಎಲ್ಲ ಥಿಯರಿ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ಬೋದು, ಕೆಲವರಿಗೆ ಬೋರ್ ಆಗ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೂ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ ಕೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ, ಬಟ್ ಹೌ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟಿಕಲ್, ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಫಾರ್ ಆಫ್, ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ನಡೆಯಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ. ಬಟ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಟ್ರೈಂಗ್ ಟು ಟೆಲ್ ದಟ್ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಹ್ಯಾಪನಿಂಗ್. So, okay, that will come in the next stage. First, let us see in practice how it happens. Tailoring tax policy and regulation to encourage positive climate action. These tools we are all familiar. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಏನು ಸಾಲಿಡ್ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಮ್ಯಾನೇಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಸೆಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಇಲ್ಲ ಕ್ಲೈಮೇಟ್ ಆಕ್ಷನ್ ಸೆಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಯೂಸೇಜ್ ಸೆಸ್, ಆ ಥರ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಆಫ್ ನ್ಯೂ ಸೆಸರ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಲೆವೀಸ್ ವಿಚ್ ವಿಲ್ ಎನ್ಕರೇಜ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಟು ಮೂವ್ ಟು ಪಾಸಿಟಿವ್ ಕ್ಲೈಮೇಟ್ ಆಕ್ಷನ್. Second, providing budget lines for specific climate action with specific budget allocation. Mitigation action, adaptation action can be mentioned in the budget specifically, and money can be set aside for that. Aligning budget proposals with climate goals. Already nammali frameworks ide nam country li. There is already a national action plan for climate change. Every state has a state action plan for climate change anta ide. And now they are pushing for city climate change action plan antanu barta ide. So which means these are all on the non-financial side, all these are happening. We have to ensure that our budgeting system is tacked to that. 15th CFC has already given recommendations for better rainwater harvesting, better water management practices, air pollution related grants ella the CFC has already recommended. Then for the smart cities, there is climate smart cities assessment framework antane ide, where you are assessed on your progress on climate goals. So idella already ide, so it is better to align the budget proposals to these frameworks and say namma climate action plan alli this item is there, for that we are providing this much money, this will involve these activities anta. That is how it should be done. And then assessing and quantifying climate across specific sectors. It is easy to say this has a positive impact or negative impact anta, but trying to assess and adanna quantify madbekalla, what is the impact? If you construct the airport in Mysore, or you construct the airport in Devanahalli, what is the positive or negative impact? Economic impact is okay, but what is the environmental or climate impact anta quantify mado tara irbeku. How is it done? Green tagging, positive negative impact of budget proposals can be assessed, and it will also how it will further the government climate goals antanu it will show. So now the question comes, idella ನಾವು ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು by the time we start we find a tagging system, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ಅದನ್ನ ಕಂಪ್ಯೂಟರೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಯಾವಾಗ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ. Fortunately we did not start from zero, we did not reinvent the wheel. Already frameworks are available, international frameworks are available which can be taken and adapted to our situation. Suppose tomorrow Karnataka says we will generate a climate budget. So best is to take one of these frameworks. Nim screen ಮೇಲೆ ಏನಿದೆ, climate fiscal framework, expenditure tagging framework, climate change public expenditure framework, climate budget tagging, ಈ ಥರ ಎಲ್ಲ ಟೂಲ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ. ಅದನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡು ನಮ್ಮ ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ಗೆ ಹೇಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಸೂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ we can modify it, have our own manual, and then we can go ahead with climate budgeting. So moving further, whether this is being done, ನೀವು ಇದು ಹೇಳಿದೆಲ್ಲ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ ಕೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ, but has it been done anywhere ಅಂದ್ರೆ it has already started happening. If you see, all our neighboring countries are already doing. Nepal is doing it, Bangladesh is doing it, Cambodia is doing it. So of course assisted by different agencies, and allu ella it is work in progress, it is not complete, but they have all started doing it very actively. So what we will now do is just ಇಷ್ಟವರೆಗೂ ಬರೀ ನಾನು ಮಾತಾಡೋದೇ ಆಯಿತು. Let us see a short video for about 3-4 minutes which will explain this CBT, climate budget tagging ಅಂತ ಏನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೀನಿ ನಾನು. It will explain. So in case the audio or video you have problem, please let us know. ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ನಿಮಗೂ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, when you look at a video you will understand it better. I'll play this video now.
Climate change and its effects are accelerating, with climate-related disasters piling up year after year. Its effects are causing widespread environmental and social damage at great economic cost. In recent years, national public funding has been directed towards climate action, and governments are stepping up to take meaningful action by identifying adaptation and mitigation measures. Financing and budgeting for these actions require substantial and targeted investments across different levels of government and sectors, making accountable climate-responsive planning and budgeting critical. Reliably tracking the progress of a country's expenditures towards their National Development Plan, National Determined Contributions, and the Paris Agreement is essential. This is a complex challenge, but effective solutions have emerged to better track climate-related spending and investments, such as the use of climate budget tagging, a tool for identifying, classifying, weighing, and marking climate-relevant expenditures in a government's budget system, thereby enabling the estimation, monitoring, and tracking of those expenditures. Take the example of Country X. Country X's climate action has allocated funding across multiple ministries' budgets, such as agriculture, energy, and transportation, but does not have a clear view of the costs and payoffs from these investments. This is solved with a few steps. Define and classify climate expenditures. Assess and measure the climate relevance of those expenditures by assigning weights on the basis of climate relevance, and use the data to analyze the efficiency and effectiveness of public expenditures. Determine how those expenditures will be identified or tagged in the public financial system. By providing data on government's existing spending, the tool can help in identifying funding gaps and under-resourced priorities in the National Climate Change Policy and Action Plan and its implementation monitoring. This leads to informed planning and budgeting aligned with the country's needs. It promotes financial discipline for climate-related investments and helps in accurate reporting of climate financing in the budget statement. Climate budget tagging provides opportunities for effective accountability. Countries such as Nepal, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Philippines, Pakistan, and Odisha State in India are already seeing improved inputs for budget formulation from their rollout of climate budget tagging. The climate budget tagging exercise is more than plain accounting, since it is a key peg in systematically integrating climate change in a country's governance and public financial management system. For more information on climate budget tagging, contact UNDP's Climate Finance Network.
Okay, so I hope that gave you a fair idea of how it is done. Short video. Now let us look at what is happening within India. So those were about other countries, but within India also there is a lot of things happening. Recently, ನೀವೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡಿರ್ಬೋದು, a newspaper article came where our Prime Minister said that India is set to exceed the climate targets which we have already proposed. So it came as recent as December 12th, where they were celebrating 5 years of the Paris Agreement on climate change, where Narendra Modi said that we are set to exceed the targets that India has set for itself, which is a very positive sign. Gujarat has already taken a few steps where there is a separate climate change department which has a separate budget for climate change called Climate Change Budget Scheme, where of course they have not tagged climate budgeting across all departments, but for this specific department they have done first, where specific schemes are identified and budget allocation given. Orissa has been trying to do climate budget tagging. So where for 2021 budget, the share of development program relevant to climate change is shown separately, and they also calculate the spending on specific benefits that improve climate resilience. So in different stages, these states are doing it, and it is time only before all other states are also catching up on that. So this was kind of a brief about climate budgeting and climate tagging. So if we have some questions at this stage, we can take it up before I move on to sustainable development goals, or we can even I can move forward and we can take the questions later.
Oh, you may go ahead, please.
Okay, we will do that. Yeah. So moving on to the other topic that we thought we will discuss today is on the Sustainable Development Goals, and of course, how does the budgeting for Sustainable Development Goals happen? Where Karnataka has also done some work. We will see that in the subsequent slides. So what are these Sustainable Development Goals? For some of us who don't know, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಬಂತಪ್ಪ ಸಡನ್ ಆಗಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, this came out of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development anta, where 193 UN member countries met in September 2015 at a UN summit in New York, and they said, let us draw up a few goals which we think we will achieve by 2030. ಮೊದಲು Millennium Development Goals ಅಂತ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. Then that was repackaged and 17 goals of Sustainable Development Goals were laid down with a target of 2030. So as I told you, 17 integrated goals which talk of social, economic and environment sustainability broadly. This was followed by another international conference on how these SDGs will be financed. So financing Sustainable Development Goals antane, there was also a kind of a conference. This was held in Addis Ababa, that is in Ethiopia, in 2015, where it was everybody recognized that it is only government spending will not solve this problem. It has to be government, the private sector as well as non-profits which have to come together to be able to solve these problems. So let us briefly look at what are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So you'll notice that there is everything: poverty, hunger, health is there, education is there, gender equity is there, climate action, economic growth, infrastructure, then life below water, life on land, renewable energy. So if you see, more or less 16 goals. So more or less in 16 goals, all the development challenges of the world are covered, or at least they have tried to cover all of them. And very important is the 17th goal, which was so important that they had to make it a goal that all these are not possible. Achieving all this is not possible unless some important partnerships are made. What I mean by partnerships? Partnerships between governments, partnership between government and international development institutions, partnership between government and the private sector, what we popularly PPPs and then Karitivi, that has to happen, and the private sector also has to get into this play. Otherwise, it is not possible because the challenge is so big. Each of these is a challenge in itself. Now, ishtotu bari climate ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ, but now we see that climate is only one of the 17 goals. There are so many other problems that we have to deal with, and which is why there is a clash. I mean, something which is good for infrastructure development may not be good for climate. So that is when the clash comes, and we have to take a more holistic view or a macro level view and then go ahead with the development. So these were the 17 goals that were drawn up. So then what is happening on these SDGs? This, until now what I explained was the global scenario, but in India what is happening on the SDGs anta ನೀವು ಕೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, at the national level, Niti Aayog is very active in this space. SDG India Index antane ಒಂದಿದೆ, they have released. This was released in 2018, and they are ranking states on this SDG India Index, which covers 13 out of the 17 goals. The 4 other goals are either not relevant or they are included in other development goals. So across 13 goals, 62 indicators are used to measure the states as well as union territories, and all of this is put up in a SDG India Index dashboard anta. ನೀವು Google ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರೆ ಇದು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. It's a very interesting dashboard which you can see, where it shows under each of this where does each state stand. Last assessment go assessment go ಏನು, which is the most improved state antella, a lot of things it is showing. So India has already kick-started that process. Karnataka also has done a lot of work. So as of now, Karnataka is standing 6th in this index. Any the SDG India index, it is standing 6th. And there are quite few areas where Karnataka is quite behind in terms of hunger, poverty, they are behind. And just look at the second bullet point. The estimated amount required to meet the 2030 targets is 9.87 lakh crores. This may be almost 4 years of Karnataka's budget, exclusively on these only goals. So SDGs are, that is the kind of problem we are facing. So any amount of resources is going to be short, which is why our system should be good so that every rupee spent is able to generate maximum value. So who is driving it? In Karnataka, the Planning, Program Monitoring and Statistics Department, they are driving it. Since you are all working within government, Nimalala, you might be closely interacting with this department on the SDG goals. So Karnataka has also created a SDG 2030 action plan on the Create Madi, where individual SDGs are mapped to all the departments, and individual department action plans are also there. And I don't know whether it was part of it or separately, but it also presented the first child budget in 2020-21, where across departments all the budget items affecting children were brought together, and the total allocation for children was arrived at. Very beautiful concept. I think United Nations supported it, and Fiscal Policy Institute was also actively involved. So this is a small budget reform which came as part of the. I have brought it under SDGs because it affects SDGs. But even otherwise, ಈ ತರ ಒಂದೊಂದು ಥೀಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಸೆಪರೇಟ್ ಬಜೆಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ that is how the concept works. So interest ಇರೋರು, you can look at this child budget and you get an idea. So this is the kind of work that was done. Now, having said all this, so much work has been done, but still there is a missing link. What is when you say SDG budgeting andre, we are not there yet fully. Yake, why are we saying that? Because we still are not presenting the SDG aligned budget. Karnataka's budget still cannot be called it's the SDG budget. Planning Monitoring Department is doing something. They are getting information from departments, compiling it on the tables. Lot of action is happening there. But is our entire budget driven by SDGs? Not yet. That's what I was mentioning. While each department has aligned its schemes and projects to the SDGs, there is no information on allocation towards each SDG on the lines of the child budget that we have. As we speak, things are improving, but still we need to get to that. Financial and physical targets are still disjoint. Exactly how does the SDG outcome, how does it translate to projects, how much for each project, how many over multiple years we are going to spend, are questions still we are not fully able to answer. Of course, which is why it is only part information, though we are definitely on the right track to reach where we want to. Really, what I will try to show you is the SDG action plan, which was recently released. Where we will go to So if you are able to see what is on screen, this is one interesting table. As finance people, it will be of interest to us, where we have a department-wise estimated budget for achieving the SDG target in crores. So illi ನೀವು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ goal number 2, this is probably linked to SDG 2. ಈ goal achieve ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ each department what is the amount is given: agriculture, food and civil supplies, women and child development, primary and secondary education. In each department, what is that is proposed by the departments? What is the gap from the regular budget or ಎಷ್ಟು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀವಿ? Similarly, for the 10-year period, 1-year period as well as 10-year period, this table is given. But unfortunately, this table is compiled separately by this department and not as part of the regular budgeting exercise. That is why that gap on the budget. And I think this is the entire budget given. How this translates into specific actions, adella, it might be there within the system. A number cannot simply come from somewhere, but it is not part of one single budgeting system. So like this, for each of the goal, how much each department is spending ಅನ್ನೋದು ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸಿಗುತ್ತೆ. This is a very useful table for somebody trying to understand. So ನಾನು ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ, 9.87 lakh crores. So this is the figure that is required over the next 10 years up to 2030. Similarly, next department wise aggregate is also given. Each department how much are they going to spend on SDGs ಅನ್ನೋದು ಈ ಡಾಕ್ಯುಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆ. So this was something interesting I thought we should look at. So this is called the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 Strategies and Action Plan for Karnataka. So as you see, it is published by the Planning, Program Monitoring and Statistics Department. In fact, as part of presenting this, it was also mentioned, if I remember correctly, that a lot more integration needs to happen between this department and the finance department in ensuring that every year budgets are also prepared in line with this. So where we stand with respect to this, other and what we are taking, what we are dropping, how much are we allocating for that, annodella, those things also will be clear from the when it becomes part of the budgeting exercise. That is what SDG budgeting is all about. So talking of this, those missing links will be provided by SDG budgeting. So what are the advantages of SDG budgeting? Let us quickly see this. Coherence between policy actions, government programs and financial outlays is clearly established. What are the policy decisions or actions we are taking? Because of that, what are the programs we are bringing out? How are they linked to the SDGs? What are the financial outlays? Why we are giving some money to a particular program? How will it help improve the which SDG it will help improve and how it will help improve? Another, everything gets linked back to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. When the budget is also prepared according to that. Next question: how many SDGs does the program impact? So it is very common nimgu ansirbodu that if you take a particular program, it is not that it is all the entire program is for one SDG only. It will definitely impact more than one SDG. Primary SDG may be job creation, but it will also help economic growth. It will have an impact on climate as well. Positive impact irbodu, negative impact irbodu. So all of this, it becomes clear once you start tagging them to SDGs. Similarly, how many government programs are impacting one SDG? Both ways. The one is to many. One SDG one program impacts how many SDGs. If you see from the other side, one SDG is impacted by how many programs? That is why I am saying impacted, because it is always positive as well as negative impact. It is never one way impact. Then once you start doing that, you will know what is the budget you are allocating for each of the 17 SDGs. Total budget is from state to, out of which, okay, your administrative expenses, salaries will go out. Rest of all the expenditure should get linked to one of the SDGs. Of course, salaries and also loan repayments alla bitre, most of the others should get linked to one of the 17 SDGs. So hege annadu very clear once you have. Then next is, are we putting the money where it is most required? Very, very important, because there is hardly any government in the world which is running a continuous surplus budget. The revenue budget surplus is through, overall budget will definitely be a deficit budget, which means money is always short, and always it is a decision of where to put the money, whereas it is most required. So that kind of a decision becomes very important. We know Karnataka is low on the poverty and hunger SDG. So are we putting enough money there, or are we continuing to pump money in an area where we are already strong? Those decisions can be taken so that there is balanced growth and development. Socially, economically, as well as environmentally, there has to be a balanced growth. ಅದು ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ this kind of a tagging will be very useful. And of course, very, very important is comparability with other states. ಈಗ ನಾವು ಏನು ಒಂದು ಟೇಬಲ್ ತೋರಿಸಿದೆ, Andhra might not be preparing it in the same way. They might be presenting their budget itself by SDGs. So unless everybody moves to a SDG budgeting system, everybody and all states move to that, it is very difficult to compare whether for every rupee of money spent in Karnataka compared to every rupee of money spent in Andhra or Maharashtra, what is the impact it is creating. That is when efficiencies start coming into the system. However, new questions ಕೇಳಬಹುದು, what is it that Maharashtra is doing? They are spending the same amount per person, but they are able to move higher in the index, whereas we are not able to. Similarly, what is it that we are doing good when it comes to industrial development or investment, which Tamil Nadu or Andhra is not able to do that? That is when the learning comparability with states and the learning happens, which is what Niti Aayog is trying to do by bringing out index and indicators. So in practice, how does it work? Again, same thing. Unless we understand in practice how it works, it is all theory. So what happens is, to begin with, budget proposals must identify the specific SDGs that a scheme or program impacts positively as well as negatively. In ಹೇಗಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು, I have a small case study we will see towards the end of this session. Then at the next stage, attempt to identify the financial outlay on each SDG. ಏನು ಇದಕ್ಕೆ very important is outcome budgeting should be very strong. ನಾವು ಏನು ಆ ಟೇಬಲ್ ನೋಡಿದ್ವಿ initially, outcome, output, outlay ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸಿದೆ columns. Our budgeting should be very strong in that. That is when we are able to link it to each SDG. Then we should be able to quantify the SDG impact of budget proposals. Isto 500 crores budget proposal bandide andre, what is the impact on each SDG anta our system should be, budgeting system should be able to give that information. And of course, it becomes very, very important for dovetailing various schemes and programs. Otherwise, industries department will be doing their own programs, employment generation, some other program will be running, rural development will be doing its own program. Unless, if you want to align all the programs towards SDGs, this is very, very important to bring the budget line items together, because budget is the only common link which is linking all the departments. It is such an important document in government budget. It is not only financial control, the operational control is also through budget to a certain extent. Administrative control is also through budget. So it is best to handle SDG also through the budgeting system. It's a common language across government anta helbodu navi. So what we'll try to do now is, like we try to understand climate tagging, here also I have a small short video which will explain how it was done in a particular country, the SDG budgeting. Idin ಮಾಡಿ, then we'll move to the small case study and then we can close.
The SDG budgeting tool in Benin. We all commit to accomplish the Sustainable Development Goals of the Agenda 2030, closely along our basic implementation principles: universality, an integrated approach, shared responsibilities, the leave no one behind standard, and accountability. For Benin, this is critically important. The German Development Cooperation actively works on successful implementations. Without the attribution of financial resources to desired policies in line with SDGs, there is no guarantee that the planned expenses actually go in the right direction. Therefore, it is essential to take the SDGs into account at the step of the budget planning. So far, only a few countries engage in strengthening the link between the budget and the SDGs. In Africa, Benin can become a pioneer by taking the link between SDG and budget a step further. This is creating a tool which automatically measures the budget contribution to each SDG. It calculates the budget dedicated to each SDG, and the budget is looked at through the filter of SDGs, identifying which planned budget expense responds to which SDG target. The tool is useful all along the budget cycle. For future budget preparations, it actively feeds the debate between the government, the parliament, and civil society on the next budget. During the budget execution, it allows to examine the status quo. And during the budget evaluation phase, the tool allows to identify further needs and actions regarding the different SDGs. The major objectives are to ensure resource mobilization in favor of prioritized SDGs by means of data and linkage availability, to measure public policies in terms of SDGs, and to monitor the effective execution of public resources contributing to SDG. We also want to strengthen transparency, visibility and accessibility of the budget and public policies. This helps informing and coordinating the ministries among themselves, but also financial and technical partners that seek to support the implementation of the SDGs effectively. The long-term use of such a tool can soon allow for a multi-year analysis of the budget in terms of SDGs. It thus provides a comprehensive overview of what has been done in the field of each SDG, informs future policy decisions and supports an efficient attribution of FTPs. It even helps voluntary reporting on the SDG activities. Therefore, the GIZ strives for the accomplishment of the budgeting tool, identifying its potential to foster the implementation of the Agenda 2030 in Benin.
So that was a short video of how it was done in Benin. So in Benin, it is so small that it may be smaller than some of our cities. But the point, and it may be, you might say it is very easy to do it there. But the point is not that. It was more to understand the concept and how they applied it. That every item of the budget gets linked to SDG, and at the end you are able to tell for each SDG how much is spent. So here what we will now try to do is to make this system a little more clear for you. I thought I'll take a small case study. And I took the case study of the Karnataka budget itself, where I took this government of Karnataka's Gramina Sumarga Yojane for development of rural roads, 20,000 kilometers of rural roads over 5 years, with the allocation for 2021 of INR 780 crores. It is already there in the budget. So I was trying to see how this in SDG budgeting scenario, how it will work. So if you see, the program is very clear, Gramina Sumarga Yojane. The output is clear, 20,000 kilometers of rural roads. 5 years, the term of the budget is clear, or term of the program is clear. It is a 5-year program more or less. And the first year's allocation is also clear, which is 780 crores. So, ನಿಮ್ಮ outcome budget ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ the outcome is not very clear. Not clear in the sentence because ನಿಮ್ಮ ಏನು ಸುಮಾರ್ಗ ಯೋಜನೆ ಅದರ GO ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಗೈಡ್ಲೈನ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ the outcomes also would be hopefully mentioned. ಅದು ನೋಡಿಲ್ಲ ನಾನು, it is hopefully mentioned there, but it is not part of the budget. Why this 20,000 kilometers road, what will it achieve ಅನ್ನೋದು, that is the outcome. Similarly, what is the allocation for the next 2 years ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕೂಡ, it may not be available from the annual budget, but in the multi-year budget which is presented separately. Now let us open up the SDGs. So what I want you to think is, now because of this program, which SDG you think is getting affected? Maybe one of you, if you are interested, you can unmute and tell ಯಾವ SDG number ಇದರಿಂದ affect ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ primarily. If not done,
Yeah.
I can tell you. Yes, sir, go ahead.
ಯಾರಾದ್ರೂ ಹೇಳಿ. ಅಶೋಕ್ ರಾವ್ ಅವರು ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳಿದ್ರು ಈಗ, ಆ ಯೋಜನೆ ಯಾವ ಗೋಲ್ಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟದ್ದಾಗಿರ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ. ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ನಿಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರಾದ್ರೂ ಒಬ್ರು ಉತ್ತರ ಕೊಡಿ.
ಗೆಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಹೇಳಿ ಸರ್, ತೊಂದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲ.
ಹೇಳಿ ನಿಧಾನಕ್ಕೆ ಹೇಳಿ. ಈಗ 17 ಗೋಲ್ಗಳಿದೆ. ಆ 17 ಗೋಲ್ಗಳಿಗೆ ಯಾವ ಗೋಲ್ಗೆ ಆ ಒಂದು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಗ್ರಾಮೀಣ ಸುಮಗ್ರ ಯೋಜನೆ ಅನ್ವಯ ಆಗ್ಬೋದು, ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಿರ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಉತ್ತರ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ, ಯಾರಾದ್ರೂ ಒಬ್ಬರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಸಾಕು.
ಸೊ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ನಾನೇ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ.
ಎಕನಾಮಿಕ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್.
ಹಾ ಹೇಳಿ ಸರ್. ಎಕನಾಮಿಕ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್. ಓಕೆ,
ಎಕನಾಮಿಕ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್
ವೆರಿ ಟ್ರೂ. ಇನ್ನೇನಾರು ಬೇರೆ ಯಾರು? ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಲಿ ಸರ್. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ಗುಡ್ ಆನ್ಸರ್. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ ಇಸ್ ಇನ್ಫ್ರಾಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್, ಬಟ್ ದೇರ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಇಂಪ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ ಆನ್ ಎಕನಾಮಿಕ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಬಬ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ಇಕ್ವಾಲಿಟೀಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ. Because road ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ cities and different clusters get connected and inequalities get ironed out. So ಇವತ್ತಿನ ನಮ್ಮ ಎಕ್ಸರ್ಸೈಸ್ಗೆ we can say infrastructure create ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Yes, that is the main objective. Economic growth impact ಆಗೇ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. So that is a kind of a sub impact, or I will say ancillary impact ಅಂತ. So as we can see, though it is a simple program of 20,000 kilometers of road, it is already affecting 3 SDGs. In fact, it can affect more. Ivattin purpose ನಾನು 3 ತಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. Now next question. These are all the positive impacts. It will also affect negatively on certain SDGs. Can someone tell me which SDG? Guess ಮಾಡಿ, ತೊಂದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲ. There is a negative impact, definitely. So it will definitely negatively impact climate, because we are constructing roads, infrastructure work, and it is always a negative impact on climate. It may also result in cutting of trees and affecting water bodies. So it will affect life on land as well. So iverna negative impact anta let us take. Climate impact more and life on land impact is also there. So the moment you put this under the SDG lens, ಈಗ ನೋಡಿ, what we did, we took an existing program, we put it under the SDG lens, and we are seeing what is the impact. Let us now move to the next stage. Somebody has come with a proposal, the government to the budget meeting ಅಂತ ನೀವೇನು ಹೇಳ್ತೀರಿ, popular budget meeting. Now in the budget meeting we are trying to assess how to maximize the SDG impact ಅಂತ. That is when discussions will happen, like can it be dovetailed with NREGA, so that we can have a bit of a positive impact on SDG 1. Innobru helbodu, some idea might come. Can we put a condition on the contractor that he uses local labor, more importantly female labor, subject to, of course, condition 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and all that. So that can we ensure better gender equality there? I'm not telling all these are possible, but for today's case study I'm saying, can we help in SDG goal number 7 by mandating solar street lighting for these roads that we are constructing? We say it will all be lit by only solar street lights. Similarly, can we mandate use of green construction material as well as green construction technology to the contractors, or we empanel only those contractors who employ these methodologies? Similarly, to mitigate this negative impact, can we mandate increase the scope of the program so that construction of the road you also do groundwater recharge wells or rainwater recharge wells alongside the roads? So what I am trying to do here is, I am just trying to throw some ideas which ideally should get in the budget discussion. Of course, not all these ideas are feasible. There will be pluses and minuses. Idagalla, adu workout agalla, area dalli there is no female labor, or contractors sigalla ನೀವು ಈ ತರ conditions ಹಾಕಿದ್ರೆ. So many discussions will happen, and you might, more ideas also might come up, and it will all boil down to, okay, you will decide on 1 or 2 ideas that can be done. But then the moment you do this, then there is a question of the project cost will increase. The more SDGs you want to impact positively, you want to reduce the negative impact, cost will obviously increase. ನಿಮಗೆ 780 ಕೋಟಿಗೆ somebody will say 20,000 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ, it will be lesser anta. That is when SDG 17 will come into picture, which will talk of, are there other funding avenues we can see? Are there partnerships possible? Part of it, can you do it in a PPP mode, where he has a help center, or of course in the case of rural roads agala, but in the case of highways, can it be a toll based system? Or the solar, definitely there are going to be excess power generation in solar. Can that be an incentive for the contractor to say, next 10 years that power you can sell to the local utility? These kind of ideas, suppose nothing is possible, ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, then if we are not prepared to compromise on this SDG thing, do we need to reduce the target from 20,000 to 14,000 kilometers for the same output? Naturally, politicians will raise a hue and cry about it. Adella agalla anta. So what I am trying to tell is not to find solutions in this case study, but to say, when you start looking through the SDG lens, what are the kinds of discussions, triggers, benefits that it provides? You might still finally conclude that we don't want to do anything, because public policy, that is a golden rule. One of the options is always to continue the status quo. If the cost of changing it or the impact of changing it is adverse, then you should continue the status quo. But all this become possible because of this kind of when every item of the budget is linked to the SDGs. So naturally, I hope this case study gave you a fair idea. Naturally, without saying, to do all this, there are some essentials required. Now again, a climate budgeting discuss ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ, SDG budgeting discuss ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿತ್ತು. Yes, if it is all there, it will help. But some basic structures need to be first in place. A good system of outcome-based budgeting should be there. ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ we will be targeting the wrong outcomes and reaching wrong decisions. Budget tagging framework ಬೇಕು. ಹೇಗೆ ಯಾವ ತರ ಟಾರ್ಗೆಟ್ ಇಟ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಕ್ಲೈಮೇಟ್ SDGಗೆ, how it can be tagged to budget line items ಅನ್ನೋದು already some thinking is there. Thankfully, ಇಲ್ಲಿ international frameworks are available. ಅದರಿಂದ now we have to develop our own framework first. A framework ಅಂತ ಕರಿಬಹುದು ನೀವು, ಇಲ್ಲ you might call it a budget tagging code ಅಂತ ಕರಿಬಹುದು, guidelines ಅಂತ ಕರಿಬಹುದು, whatever. But unless initial thinking is going into it, ಒಂಥರ ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ಎನೇಬಲ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಲೇಬೇಕು, ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಮ್ಯಾನ್ಯುಯಲ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಬಜೆಟಿಂಗ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ವೇರ್ ಯು ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಟ್ರ್ಯಾಕಿಂಗ್ ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ ಬೈ ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್, ಬೈ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್, ಸ್ಕೀಮ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಬೈ ಆಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಹೆಡ್. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂಥರ ಟ್ಯಾಗಿಂಗ್ ಸೇರಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ the budget statement will become complex, which can only be handled when it happens within the software. Then integration with the IFMIS. IFMIS andre or basically Khazane, that is running Khazane software. It has to get integrated with that, the budget, as well as when we actually account the actuals. Now spending, revenue generation start adaga, transactions account ಮಾಡುವಾಗಲೇ this tagging also should take place. So other it should be integrated with IFMIS. And of course, widespread capacity building is required, which is what ivattu it is only sensitization. But naade idan tagondu ನೀವು ಹೋಗಿ ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. You will need a lot more detailed training with actual budget format. ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. So as I said, it is a journey. If it begins now, in the next 2 to 3 or 5 years, Karnataka can aspire to have a complete climate or SDG budget. But that need not be the end goal. Part implementation is possible and it is useful also, but that is a call which has to be taken. And I am sure, given the way things are moving in the country, worldwide as well as in the country, it won't be long before Karnataka will also actively start presenting a climate and SDG budgets. And that is where I feel, one is of course to that is where I feel that as finance professionals within government, that is our job. KSAAD people are the people who are at the forefront of the accounting and audit. I think that is where our role is very critical. So I think we have time for a few discussions, and then we can close it at the end. Floor is open now.
Thank you very much. Now the floor is open for discussion, and Shri Ashok Rao has done a brilliant job of giving awareness and sensitization on newer budget challenges in terms of climate and SDG financing. So the entire presentation is open for discussion. If you have any question, please raise it now. ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲೂ ಕೇಳ್ಬೋದು, ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ನಲ್ಲೂ ಕೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಹೇಳಿ ಕೃಷ್ಣಪ್ಪ ಅವರು. ಕೃಷ್ಣಪ್ಪ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿ.
ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ SDG ಬಜೆಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬಜೆಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಈಗ ವಾಯ್ಸ್ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಕಟ್ಕೊಂಡು.
ಸರ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ, ಹಲೋ
ಹೇಳಿ ಹೇಳಿ.
ಇನ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ SDG ಬಜೆಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಲೋ 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 ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ SDG ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಸರ್ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಹೇಳಿ.
ನಮ್ಮ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ SDG ಬಜೆಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ
ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಸರ್.
ಸರ್ ನಿಮ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ SDG ಬಜೆಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಸರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, SDG ಬಜೆಟ್ ಅಂತ ಸೆಪರೇಟ್ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ. ದಟ್ ಆ ಡಾಕ್ಯುಮೆಂಟ್ ನಾನು ತೋರಿಸಿದ್ನಲ್ಲ, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದೇರ್. Plus the budget documents, if you see what is placed plus what is on the website, SDG budget anta separate illa, where each budget line is tagged. But ನೀವು ಹೇಳ್ದಂಗೆ we are budgeting for a few SDGs which we thought, which is very right, which means we are already started. Karnataka has started, yes, definitely. That's true.
2021. Okay.
ಹೇಳಿ ಶ್ರೀಧರ್.
ಸರ್ ಈಗ ಈ SDG ಬಜೆಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಪಾಸಿಟಿವ್ ಅಂಡ್ ನೆಗೆಟಿವ್ ಎರಡೂ ಇದೆ. ಏನೇ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರಿ ಮೇಲೆ ಈ ಪಾಸಿಟಿವ್ ನೆಗೆಟಿವ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕಂಪ್ಯಾರಿಸನ್, ಈ ಪಾಸಿಟಿವ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಪಾಲಿಸಿಗಳನ್ನ ಅಡಾಪ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬಹುದಲ್ಲ SDG ಬಜೆಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ?
ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಸರ್, ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಲಿ. ಈಗ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ನಮ್ದು, ಈ ಪಾಸಿಟಿವ್ ನೆಗೆಟಿವ್ ಇಂಪ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ ನಾವು ಇವತ್ತು ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಬಟ್ ಇನ್ ಅವರ್ ಬಜೆಟಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಆ ತರ ಒಂದು ಅದನ್ನ ರೇಟ್ ಮಾಡೋ ಫ್ರೇಮ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನೌ ಇಂಡಿವಿಜುವಲ್ ಡಿಪಾರ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೋ ದೇ ಅಲೋಕೇಟ್ ಫ್ರೇಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಅಂಡ್ ದೆನ್ ದೇ ಬಜೆಟ್ ಫಾರ್ ಇಟ್. ಬಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಒನ್ಸ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಅ ರೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಆರ್ ಟ್ಯಾಗಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್, ಈ ಪಾಸಿಟಿವ್ ಇಂಪ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ 5 stars ನೀವು ಕೊಟ್ರೆ 5 star ಪಾಸಿಟಿವ್ ಇಂಪ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ವಾಟ್, ಅದೊಂದ್ ಕಡೆ ಎಲ್ಲೋ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಇರ್ಬೇಕಲ್ಲ. ಇಲ್ಲ ನೆಗೆಟಿವ್ -2 ಕೊಟ್ರೆ ಫಾರ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್, ಪವರ್ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ ಸೆಟಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀರಿ, ಸಪೋಸ್ ದೇರ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ -3 ಇಂಪ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್. ಆ -3 ಏನು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಥ್ರೂ ಔಟ್ ಇಟ್ ಶುಡ್ ಬಿ ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟುಡ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಸೇಮ್ ವೇ. ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಆ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್, ಆ ಫ್ರೇಮ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಏನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ನಾವು, ಇಂಟರ್ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಫ್ರೇಮ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದೆ ನಾನು, ಅದು ತಗೊಂಡು ನಾವು ಅಡಾಪ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಆಸ್ ಯು ಸೇ ಮೋರ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಮೋರ್ ಪಾಸಿಟಿವ್ ಇಂಪ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ತಗೋಬಹುದು. ಪ್ಲಸ್ ನೆಗೆಟಿವ್ ಇಂಪ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ತಗೊಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಚಾಲೆಂಜಸ್. ಕೆಲವು ಸರಿ ಬಿಡಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ, ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ರಿಕ್ವೈರ್ಡ್ ದಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್. ಬಟ್ ಕಾನ್ಶಿಯಸ್ ಡಿಸಿಷನ್ ತಗೋಬಹುದು ಅವಾಗ. ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಟ್ರೂ.
ಸರ್ ಇನ್ನು SDG ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ ಹೇಳಿ ಸರ್, ಅದೇನು SDG ಬಜೆಟಿಂಗ್ ಅದು ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಆಗಲಿ.
ಸಸ್ಟೈನಬಲ್ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗೋಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ.
ಸಸ್ಟೈನಬಲ್ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗೋಲ್ಸ್, ಓಕೆ ಸರ್.
SDG ಫುಲ್ ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಅದೇ 17 ಗೋಲ್ಸ್ ಏನಿದೆ ಕ್ಲೀನಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂತಲ್ಲ, ಅದನ್ನ ಬ್ರೀಫ್ ಆಗಿ SDG ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ.
ಓಕೆ.
ಹಲೋ
ಹೇಳಿ ಸರ್. ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್.
ಈಗ ಇನ್ನೇ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲೇಬೇಕು. ಹಲೋ ಹಲೋ
ಸರ್ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, ವಾಯ್ಸ್ ಬ್ರೇಕ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು.
ಯಾರು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು? ಹೇಳಿ ಸಿದ್ದನಗೌಡ.
ಸರ್ ಈಗ ವಾರ್ಷಿಕ ಬಜೆಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ SDBಗಾಗಿನ ಇಷ್ಟು % ನಾವು ರಿಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲೇಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ನಮ್ಮ ರೂಲ್ಸ್ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಇದೆ ಸರ್? ಏನಾದ್ರು ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ಸ್ ಏನಾದ್ರು?
ಸರ್ ನನ್ ಗೊತ್ತಿದ್ದಂಗೆ ಸದ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಆ ತರ ಇಲ್ಲ. ನೀವು ಒಂದೊಂದು SDGಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟಿಷ್ಟೇ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಈ SDG ಆಕ್ಷನ್ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಪ್ಲಾನಿಂಗ್ ಮಾನಿಟರಿಂಗ್ ಡಿಪಾರ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಅವರು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ತರಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ವಾಟ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಅಲೋಕೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಫಾರ್ ಈಚ್ SDG ಏನ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರಿ ಅಂತ ತರ್ಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಆಸ್ ಫಾರ್ as I know ಆ ತರ ರಿಕ್ವೈರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಬೇರೆ ಯಾರು ಪಾರ್ಟಿಸಿಪೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಇಫ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಅವೇರ್ ಆ ತರ ರಿಕ್ವೈರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಎನ್ಲೈಟನ್. SDG ಬಜೆಟಿಂಗ್ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ಅವಾಗ ಆ ತರ ಪ್ರಾವಿಷನ್ಸ್ ತರ್ಬೋದು.
ಈ ಸದ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋ ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಕೂಡ ಆಯವ್ಯಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಸುಸ್ಥಿರ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ ಗುರಿಗಳಿಗೋಸ್ಕರ ಇಷ್ಟೇ ಆಯವ್ಯಯದ ಹಂಚಿಕೆ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ನನಗೂ ಖಚಿತವಾದಂತ ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಈಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಆಯವ್ಯಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳನ್ನ ಆ ಸುಸ್ಥಿರ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ ಗುರಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಹೊಂದಿಸ್ಬೋದು, ಅದರ ಅಡಿನಲ್ಲಿ ತರಬಹುದು ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದನ್ನೇ ಶ್ರೀ ಅಶೋಕ್ ರಾವ್ ಅವರು ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಮುಖ್ಯಮಂತ್ರಿಗಳು ಬಿಡುಗಡೆ ಮಾಡಿದಂತಹ ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಟಜೀಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಆಕ್ಷನ್ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಫಾರ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ 23ನೇ ತಾರೀಕು ಡಿಸೆಂಬರ್ ಸನ್ಮಾನ್ಯ ಮುಖ್ಯಮಂತ್ರಿಗಳು ಆ ಒಂದು ರಿಲೀಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಅದನ್ನ ಅವರು ಬಹಳ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ತೋರಿಸ್ಕೊಟ್ರು. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಇಲಾಖಾವಾರುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಆಯಾ ಗುರಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಂತೆ ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳ ಅಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಹಂಚಿಕೆ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಅವ್ರು ತೋರಿಸಿದ್ರು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಒಟ್ಟಾರೆ ಬಜೆಟ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಸುಸ್ಥಿರ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ ಗುರಿಗಳನ್ನ ಸಾಧಿಸಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರನೇ ಎಷ್ಟು ಆಯವ್ಯಯನ ಎತ್ತಿಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಇನ್ನು ಏನು ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋ ಹಂಗೆ ಯಾವುದು ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅಶೋಕ್ ರಾವ್ ಅವರೇ?
ಎಸ್ ಸರ್, ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್.
ನನಗೆ
ಯಾವ ತರ ರಿಕ್ವೈರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಸದ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ. ಬಟ್ SDG ಬಜೆಟಿಂಗ್ ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಆದ್ರೆ ಅವಾಗ ಆ ತರ ರೂಲ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ತರ್ಬೋದು.
ಹೌದು ಹೌದು. ಪ್ರಕಾಶ್ ಇದೆಯಾ? ತಮ್ದೇನ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇದೆಯಾ ಪ್ರಕಾಶ್? ಇಲ್ಲ. ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇವತ್ತು 3ನೇ ದಿನದ ತರಬೇತಿ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ, ಕಳೆದ 2 ದಿನಗಳು ಮತ್ತು ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಬೆಳಗ್ಗಿನ ಒಂದು ತರಬೇತಿ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಬಹಳವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡಿದಂತಹ ವಾತಾವರಣ ಯಾವುದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ವಾತಾವರಣ, ಹೂಡಿಕೆಯ ವಾತಾವರಣ, ಇನ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ಲೈಮೇಟ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಇಲ್ಲ ಬಿಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಕ್ಲೈಮೇಟ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಆ ತರ ವಾತಾವರಣದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಹೊರತು ನೈಸರ್ಗಿಕ ವಾತಾವರಣದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಆಯವ್ಯಯನೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. I think climate budgeting and also budgeting for the sustainable development goals are brand new items being introduced in this current training program. There are also new concepts and practices to be incorporated in the budgeting at all levels in the government India. Now, today's session, in my opinion, has given a lot of benefits for our officers in terms of creating awareness and also creating sensitivity or sensitization on 2 important challenges in budgeting in the forthcoming years. One, budgeting for the climate. The other one, budgeting for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. UN Sustainable Development Goal has already been adopted in India at the national level and also at the state level. But to prepare a separate budget for the Sustainable Development Goal, I think what has been informed in this current training session by Sri Ashok Rao. See, there are also many lessons that we can learn from this presentation. As accounting and audit officers, this training session has introduced to you many new concepts apart from climate budgeting and SDG financing. For example, international public sector accounting standards, medium-term budgeting, outcome budgeting, public investment management, public finance management diagnostic, various techniques which are mostly used in the management sciences. And also he has given a very good awareness for all of us on thematic budgeting, whether it is related to child budgeting, gender budgeting, and now under that category we can also include the climate budgeting and the SDG financing. I think this is something very, very important because these are going to be the challenges of fiscal policy and budgeting in the years to come. And this session has already given you some idea as to how we can start preparing in case such budgeting are going to be a reality in the years to come. It is also important that Sri Ashok Rao has brought the discussion from the global level to the national level, from national level to subnational level with Karnataka focus. And I think Karnataka government planning department has already prepared a vision document, especially in regard to financing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. If those are to be financed by public expenditure, then obviously those financing suggestions must be incorporated in the forthcoming budget of the government of Karnataka. And thereby, I think today's lecture by Sri Ashok Rao has given us some background as to how we can gradually incorporate such proposal or recommendations of the UN Sustainable Development Goals 2030 by the government of Karnataka. You may also have recognized in today's lecture the application of newer method of training, online training by Sri Ashok Rao. He has used the videos. I think use of video for training up to now is the first time. And also Sri Ashok Rao has used some of the best way of visual effects in the PPT. So we normally have the graphs, the tables, and the words being shown on the PPT. But he has shown how training can also be very effective when the visual effects are captured on the PPT slides. And also he brought some of the internet resources for the training purposes. I think that part of the training in terms of pedagogy is also something new he has added to this training session. Now, I am also glad to recognize that many participants have come forward and asked questions during the discussion time. And I think within 3 days, I think our participants have built a small capacity in themselves to be participating in the very discussion. And I want every officer, like the way some officers have participated today, to take part in the discussions in tomorrow and in the rest of the sessions of this training program. And Sri Ashok Rao said that this is the last day of the current calendar year of 2020, and we are going to make a new beginning of 2020-21 from tomorrow onwards. I think when you look back this year, if you look back this back, I think all of us were affected, concerned, and suffered because of COVID-19 pandemic. And most of the budgeting in India at the national and at the state level have been beset with the problems and consequences of pandemic 2019. And I think we wish the pandemic will end soon, not only within our state, but elsewhere in India and also at the global level. And we wish that the new year will bring a world free from the COVID-19 pandemic for everyone on this earth. I think that is also one of the best environment that we can create in the new year 2021. And with these words, I take this opportunity to thank Sri Ashok Rao, to thank for accepting our invitation. And as I told in the beginning, he has been a big support for our training programs in financial management and also public finance. Both the training programs are designed and conducted for officers in the Karnataka State Audit and Account. He is an experienced and the most knowledgeable accountant and also the company secretary, and he has got excellent background in the financial management and also applied public finance management, especially in the government sector. And not only he is a resource person, he is a very resourceful person. And every time he comes with new ideas and new materials and new pedagogy of training the government officers. And on behalf of the Fiscal Policy Institute and on behalf of every participant and on my personal behalf, a big thanks to Sri Ashok Rao for accepting our invitation and for delivering that very informative and very forward-looking, way forward lecture of this training program of the public finance. Thank you very much, Sri Ashok Rao. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
sir.
Thank you very
to all
much.
the participants.
Thank you very
Wish you a
much.
very happy New Year to all of you.
Yes, thank you very much. And like the way you have helped this year and the previous years, we look forward to your continued support and help and encouragement for our training programs and other activities in the new year as well. So please help us. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So now it is the last part of the today's training session, and that is the polling. Okay. So before we start the polling, as you all know, as per the schedule, we have the 4th day of the training program tomorrow, and we have Professor Gayatri, a very eminent expert in public finance from the Institute of Social and Economic Change, to help us from her knowledge and experience on 2 topics in public finance. She is a very experienced professor who has been working with the government of Karnataka's finance department over last 25 years in various policy advisory and policy research. So kindly join like the way you have joined by 10 o'clock tomorrow. So we strictly start or punctually start at 10:15. I was very happy this morning when all of you have joined before 10:15, and I must thank you for your. I must thank and appreciate your punctuality, and also be responding to the time schedule of this training. I must thank you all of you very well. And second thing is that I also appreciate the active participation of some of the officers, but I want more officers to join the discussion from tomorrow onwards. Okay, and before we meet next year, that is tomorrow. So it is a long way to meet from this year to the next year. Tomorrow will be the new year, and I wish you a very happy new year well in advance. And it is over to you all to start the polling now. Go ahead.